The Records of Originium Rhine Labs manga is one of the best Arknight stories that I have read. One of my personal favorites, even though I've only read it just recently. I always liked Rhine Labs as like a topic. It was a really interesting part of the lore. But this one specific event really drove that home to me and made me care about the characters a lot more. So what happens during this event? Well, the story takes place in two main parts. One tells the story of the Diabolic Crisis, and the other tells the story of Dahlia, a infected stowaway on the Rhodes Island land ship. So first of all, the event starts with Dahlia getting smuggled into the Rhodes Island land ship. When she's there, she gets discovered by Ifrit, who takes her in as her subordinate. Ifrit obviously sees a lot of herself in this little girl and wants her to refer to Ifrit as boss. However, while trying to get her some nice sweets, Dahlia's Originium Arts activate, which is an extremely powerful water-based Originium Arts, which results in Saria stepping in to prevent harm to any of the Rhodes Island employees. However, Silence gets involved and prevents Saria from interacting with the child further. After this incident with Dahlia, the story enters a flashback which revolves around the Diabolic Crisis, and from that point, the two stories jump back and forth with each other. But for the sake of this video, it's gonna completely cover the Diabolic Crisis and then jump back into the Dahlia situation. As is revealed in the manga, Ifrit, as a child, was experimented on, and he had a shard of the Diabolos Sarkaz inserted into her in order to revive that specific race. This, however, didn't go exactly as planned, as eventually, during these experiments, she melted down and wiped out the lab that she was being experimented on in. Saria is the one who finds her, pulls her from the rubble, and after that, she is delivered to Silence, who stabilizes her despite her serious condition. After this, Corvus, who is the director that Silence works directly under, recommends the chimeric treatment in order to help stabilize Ifrit. This operation is successful on Ifrit and helps stabilize her condition. The chimeric treatment is a pretty interesting method of treating puberty, as it involves injecting a specifically modified Originium shard into the infected and then stimulating it to attract the other infection shards in the body to this singular point, which overall lowers the symptoms the infected are suffering from. It is, however, an experimental and unproven technique, but it worked extremely well on Ifrit, with the major side effect of being extremely painful. These experiments would eventually lead to the reason why Saria and Silence have both distanced themselves from Rhine Labs, and that was due to the continuous escalations of the experiments that Ifrit was undergoing. Corvus, despite being a brilliant man of science, has a very loose set of morals and only finds value in people who can contribute to the development of science. As such, Saria and Silence would both grow incredibly close to Ifrit over the course of her initial experiment. Both became extremely disillusioned with the continuation of them, as Ifrit's pain was becoming more and more obvious. The trio had become a bound family, with Silence even giving Saria and Ifrit a feather of hers to symbolize this close bond that they now had. As such, after one particular experiment, Corvus took Silence off the experiments, and Saria had to accept this as she was becoming so busy with her own investigation. This caused a rift slowly form between the two, as Saria was trying to protect both Silence and Ifrit, while Silence was trying to protect Ifrit, but due to some manipulation by Corvus, began to mistrust Saria as well. However, things come to a head as Saria is meeting with an enigmatic character known as the Tin Man. He reveals to her all of Rhine Lab deception, how they used smaller companies as fronts to perform human experimentation. Saria is just about ready to start smashing skulls when he receives a call that a massive explosion has occurred in the lab that Ifrit is in. Silence, at the same time, in an effort to rescue Ifrit, sedates her so that she would simulate death and that then she would be able to get Ifrit out of Ryan Labs. However, after being sedated during the experiment, her oaths go out of control and she begins to rampage, taking on the form of a fiery demon. Saria, returning to Ryan Labs, steps in to stop her, initially trying to wake her up, but as things begin to heat up, Saria goes on the offensive, beating her down quite severely. She even prepares to kill Ifrit in order to ensure she is stopped, but Ifrit comes true and offers Saria a sweep. This is obviously extremely distressing to Saria, but her mental roller coaster is not over yet, as Silence had seen her in the pose of killing Ifrit. As such, Silence refuses to allow Saria near Ifrit, and Saria steels herself for her confrontation with Kristen. This is not a pleasant event for Saria, as she is basically forced to abandon everything she's built up as a director of Ryan Labs. She tears through the defenses Kristen has prepared in her office, including one that completely nullifies Saria's Originium oaths. However, Saria is simply built different and punches through even that, which surprises even Kristen. Their confrontation ends with Saria telling Kristen that she will never allow anyone at Ryan Labs to touch Ifrit again, and she resigns. So, with all that being said, Ifrit and Dahlia clearly parallel each other's stories. Both were looked after by Silence and Saria, and both have extremely powerful Originium oaths that they could not control at a young age. Silence even puts Dahlia through the chimeric treatment in the vain hope that she will be able to limit the horripity that is afflicting her. However, this fails, and Ifrit takes Dahlia into the desert in search of the miracle cure that can be found at the oasis. This is a fairy tale, and Ifrit knows this, but she doesn't want to completely give up hope on Dahlia, as in Ifrit's mind, Saria and Silence never gave up on her. Due to Ifrit's sudden disappearance, Saria and Silence organize a rescue, which by the time the rescue team arrives, Dahlia's Originium oaths has completely gone out of control. Silence gives Saria a sedative, which, with the help of Ifrit, Saria manages to inject into Dahlia, sedating her. The Ifrit that helps Saria is the same Ifrit that once rampaged through Ryan's lab, having now gained control over her Originium oaths and becoming quite the capable combatant. However, despite the best efforts of everyone at Rhodes Island, and Ifrit even carrying her friend to the oasis, there is no miracle cure in Arknights, and as such, Dahlia passes away in Ifrit's arms, despite being submerged in the oasis, which fully does break Ifrit's heart, as she had hoped that she would be able to save this friend in need. The manga ends after this point, with Saria and Silence drawing slightly closer to one another. The manga takes place before the events of Dorothy's vision, so it's clear to see the build-up towards their inevitable reconciliation. This manga obviously gives a much deeper look into the background of Saria, Silence, and Ifrit than is available in the Arknights game, so it's definitely well worth a read for anyone who cares about these characters. Obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I think this is one of the best pieces of content currently available in the Arknights world. It is, obviously very tragic, and a lot of messed up stuff happens in it, like human experimentation and dealing with terminal disease, but it is stories like this that really are the foundation that made me like Arknight. It's very character driven, not that the story isn't good, but it's mainly the characters that push things forward in this story. And that's okay, because as these characters develop, it drags you into the story more, and it makes you actually care what happens to these people, and that you hope they have a happy ending. Dahlia, for only being a manga character, you care about her story because you care about the characters that are around her, which is good. And I hope we see more stories like this in manga format. There's currently a Black Steel story, as well as a A1 Reserves story as well. And in the future, I hope we get stories surrounding other characters or other groups that are less explored in game. Not that I wouldn't like a manga on the Kazemiris or the Abyssal Hunters, but they get a lot of content in game, and I think these manga stories have a chance to really explore the unexplored parts of Arknights, and they can even be used as a good entry point, which, despite requiring some underlying knowledge of Arknights, the Rhine Labs manga is very accessible to new readers, which is one of its strengths in my mind. And that's about it. I'm going to talk to y'all later. Be good people.